Hello everyone and welcome to the PR Summit meeting. My name is Jan and I'll be moderating today's call. Our speaker today is Timitra Hildebrand-Jones, Director of Diversity and Inclusion at global climate innovator Trane Technologies, presenting Keeping It Real, Trane Technologies' approach to facilitating transformative conversations. We'll turn to the presentation in just a moment, but first I want to go over the web conference instructions. Everyone is currently in mute so that the background noise does not become distracting for the other participants. To view today's presentation as the screens change live, you may go to the link that was sent to you in your reminder email. Once in there, you can click anywhere on a page. You'll see a pop-up with the option to make a comment. Feel free to ask questions during the presentation by clicking on any slide and enter them as a comment, and we'll make sure all of your questions are answered. For the newer participants in the group, it might be useful to review some of the main benefits you can take advantage of as a member at no additional charge. First are the live monthly web conference meetings, which you've already dialed into today. I hope you find these useful, and we have an excellent lineup, which you can see by going to our website schedule page. Second, we do record all of these, so if you're traveling or stuck in another meeting, simply log in at your leisure, and the full archives of past meetings are available to you with a number of interesting topics. Third, get to know the other members. By logging in, you can see all of their profiles, and we're glad to make any introductions if wished. Fourth, if you're wrestling with any key issues or decisions, we strongly encourage you to reach out to the other members, and our site makes it very easy to post questions. The seniority and experience of your fellow members make this the best possible forum to get advice from others who've probably dealt with the same issues and can give you sound advice on what worked and what did not. Fifth, we really encourage site visits. If you've not visited others' offices to have a great discussion on best practices and see their facilities, please do so. You can log in to see the other members' companies and cities, so feel free to reach out, or we're happy to make introductions. Six, we also generate executive summaries of meetings, including the key takeaways and learning nuggets, so that you can reference them and put them right into action. Seventh, our members are very busy, so we started a service where we pick out the top 6 most interesting articles among thousands at hundreds of sites to keep you abreast and ensure you don't miss the key ones. Lastly is our Book of the Month summary that you can either read or listen to as you commute. Each month we select the most interesting book, then summarize the ideas, so within minutes you can absorb the key takeaways. There are many other benefits, of course, but I just wanted to highlight some and ask you to keep a lookout in your inbox for a number of these each month. That takes care of the housekeeping items. Give me just a moment to pull up the speaker's presentation and introduce her. Okay, all set. Now, before I turn the call over, I'd like to tell you a bit about our speaker today. As Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Trane Technologies, Timitra ensures the continued cultivation of Trane's winning work culture by working closely with company leadership to equip and empower those leaders to lead with an inclusive mindset. She also works with a strong network of diversity champions, councils, and employee resource groups to mobilize and activate the company's progressive, diverse, and inclusive strategies and programming across the employee population. Timitra most recently served as Director of Human Resources for Trane's commercial HVAC business and as the Global Co-Chair for Trane's Black Employee Network, an employee resource group serving more than 300 employees. Prior to joining Trane Technologies, Timitra held human resource roles at Bank of America, GMAC, Insurance, and Lincoln Financial Group. She holds a Master's of Human Resources and Labor Relations from North Carolina A&T State University and a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. Timitra, thank you so much for being with us today. Just say next when you wish the slides to advance, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Jan. Good afternoon or good morning or good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. I am thankful that you've all joined the conversation today. I'm very excited to share a little bit with you around Trane Technologies' approach to facilitating transformative conversations. We have titled this Keeping It Real because these are the conversations that allow all of our employees to be who they are, their authentic selves, and keep it real with their opinions and viewpoints on a variety of topics. And as we talk today, I will share with you Trane Technologies' take on courageous conversations in the workplace and how we started on this journey and where we are today. You will hear me use transformative conversations or courageous conversations or bold conversations as a term interchangeably throughout today's conversation, because these are all very descriptive words for these types of conversations in the workplace, very real words. And if you've ever been part of any of these types of conversations in the workplace, you will identify with all of those descriptors. So if you go to the next slide, please. So our agenda, we will talk about Trane Technology's beginning, how we began our journey on having these transformative conversations, our structure for these types of conversations, how we've continued to grow in this space as well. I'll provide you with a list of some of the topics we've explored within Trane Technologies. And it says let's practice, and what we'll do is kind of walk through some of the sample content and sample conversation starters that we have used within Trane Technologies. And then I'll provide you with some tips on how you can start these same conversations in your workplace. Next slide, please. So as I talk about how Trane Technologies began our transformative conversations, this may not be very new at this point. Over the past few weeks, many companies who may not have delved into these transformative or courageous conversations are now doing just that. With the recent event of the killing of George Floyd, many companies are starting to have these types of conversations. But for Trane Technologies, we hosted our first discussion in September of 2016. And if I could just take a minute to share with you kind of what was going on in the United States at that time. Starting in 2014, there were three very high-profile police-involved shootings: Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, Tamir Rice. We had 2015 with others: Eric Harris, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray. And in 2016, we had Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, and in Charlotte, North Carolina, where Trane Technologies is based, right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, we had a shooting with the individual you see on the screen, Keith Lamont Scott. With that being so close to home, many of our employees began to ask many leaders in our company, how would we respond? How can we as employees manage or balance our emotions, our concerns, our fears, especially as Black employees, and how do we balance that with work? How can we talk about that at work? Or can we talk about that at work? And at that time, I was not in the diversity and inclusion role, but as Jan mentioned in the introduction, I was the enterprise chair for our Black Employee Network. And with that role, I partnered with our diversity and inclusion group and started to share the concerns of our employees. We put our heads together and brainstormed on how we could best help our employees in managing through that difficult time, helping them express themselves at work, and helping other employees better understand their colleagues who were dealing with these emotions as it related to that particular event. So in September 2016, we hosted what we called at that time a listen and learn session over lunch, and it was just for employees in our Davidson, North Carolina site, which is our North America headquarters. You know, we expected probably 30, 40 people to show up. We actually had over 100 employees to show up, a very diverse group of employees came to this session and really poured out all of their emotions and thoughts, which I'll share a little bit with you shortly. Next slide, please. So as we brainstormed on this discussion in September of 2016, we really took a lot of time to pull together a structure and making sure that we provided a safe space for our employees to share their viewpoints, opinions, and feelings. But we also, of course, wanted to make sure that we were protecting the company during this time, during this conversation. So we structured it in four ways. There were four things that we considered. Kind of why? What was our intent? What do we really want to get out of this? And really, when it boiled down to it, we wanted our employees to have a safe space to come together, not only to share, but to listen and to learn and unify. Unify not necessarily meaning agreeing with all of their colleagues' opinions and viewpoints, but unifying in a way that they were seeking to understand and open to hearing different viewpoints and opinions. The what was around the safe space. Kind of what do we want people to come in and understand and feel? And one really important piece of this was making sure that the dialogue was respectful. We knew that this was a sensitive, even controversial topic, and we still wanted to provide a space that people felt they could have an honest conversation and maybe even a breakthrough. On the how, we used our social responsibility statement, our diversity and inclusion mission, to really set the context for the dialogue. We introduced rules of engagement, which I'll share with you within our conversation today, and we wanted to make sure that we provided, again, a safe space where respect was really the foundation of the conversation. And the who, at the time, as I explained, we had a diverse group of a little over 100 employees from both Davidson and our other Charlotte location. Next slide, please. We also wanted to make sure that there was clarity on the roles and the responsibilities for both the facilitator as well as the participant. So for our facilitator, which was a shared facilitation for our first one, and it has been for many others. But again, we wanted to make sure our facilitators were reinforcing the company values and the diversity and inclusion priorities, providing that safe space, which we've talked about, as well as encouraging open-mindedness and compassion. Participants' roles, and these were the ground rules or rules of engagement that we set in 2016 and we have continued to today to use. We explained to the participants that their role in this conversation is seeking to understand. And what we mean by that is we want people to listen with the same level of curiosity, even if there is a viewpoint or an opinion that they may disagree with or is different from their own. Be respectful, being open to hear viewpoints, opinions that are different from your own, as well as being open to consider those viewpoints and opinions and think through them before dismissing them. Being mindful that, one, we are in the workplace, and we want to be mindful that we are giving people an opportunity and a space to speak and be heard, and being mindful that, again, we may not agree as we have these conversations. And one that we feel is probably the most important is practicing self-care. I mentioned that many of these conversations around sensitive or controversial topics. And during the conversations, there, of course, are a range of emotions that could come up for anyone. And we want people, our participants, our employees, to understand that they can certainly take the time that they need to practice self-care. That may mean that they need to walk away for a while, step away from the conversation, practice other self-care methods such as deep breathing. Whatever works, we want to make sure that our participants understand that they have the permission to practice that self-care. Next slide, please. So here is, and I will not read all of this, but we have 2 slides that is feedback from participants from that 2016 conversation. And a lot of the feedback that we heard was, wow, I've never had this conversation in the workplace before. And thank you for providing this space and restoring my hope and humanity in the workplace, in my leaders even. We have also received feedback that I have never had to consider the feelings that my colleagues have shared. I've never had to consider those types of concerns or fears, and this has been eye-opening for me. You can go to the next slide. Other feedback that we received was, this had a huge impact on me. We've had many of our employees who have left these conversations and gone on to do their own research and continue to share with their colleagues through either our Yammer feeds that we have internally, via email. We've had many of our employees who have stepped up and raised their hands to be active participants in our diversity and inclusion efforts. And that looks very different. Being engaged in our employee resource groups is one way that employees have done that. Others have stepped up to volunteer to help with various events or trainings. So we feel that we've had a lot of great feedback and results coming out of these conversations. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about how we've grown since 2016, September 2016, when Trane Technologies hosted its first Transformative conversation. Since then, we have hosted a series of these conversations. We plan for 6 per year. Some years, depending on what's going on in the world, we may have more than 6. And depending on what we have going on internal to our company, we may have a little less than 6. But we do try to make this a series that we host from our Diversity and Inclusion office. And our attendance since September 2016 has ranged anywhere from 300 to 800 employees per session. And most of our participants are remote. If you remember in our September 2016 session, I indicated that we had it in Davidson. There was no remote participation. These were all people in the room. Since then, we have added the remote participation option, which again has grown our attendance. In 2019, we had a total of attendance for 6 sessions of 3,200 employees. And we recently had a discussion with our CEO that had about 2,000 employees join that discussion across the world. So we have great participation from our employees, and they look forward to these discussions. We know that by connecting people and ideas, we begin to leverage the power of diversity and inclusion. And it isn't important, again, that we all agree in these discussions. We really want people just to learn something, just to be a part of the discussion and have sincere curiosity and respect for all points of view. Next slide. So some of our topics that we've explored in the past, and this, of course, is not an exhaustive list. There are many other topics that we've explored, but here are some of our high-attended topics. Our political climate was one where we actually explored the topic around politics, and during a presidential election year, which was a very good conversation. Generational diversity in the workplace, empowering the color-brave ally, eliminating stigma around mental illness, working across borders, which was a focus on multiculturalism in the workplace, and LGBT diversity in the workplace. Many of these topics, because we explore so many topics, being in diversity and inclusion in our diversity and inclusion office, we are not experts in all of these topics. So oftentimes we invite experts in to help facilitate these conversations. For example, the mental illness conversation. We leveraged someone from a local hospital. He's the director of their mental health department, and he facilitated the conversation for us. Our political climate conversation. We leveraged our governmental affairs department to help facilitate that conversation. Also, many of the topics tie into our Heritage Month that our employee resource groups will celebrate. For example, Empowering the Color Brave Ally was hosted in January as part of our MLK Day celebration. And the LGBT diversity in the workplace was hosted in June of last year as part of Pride Month. So you can see some of the topics we've explored, as well as how we try to tie that into our employee resource groups and their Heritage Month celebrations, or the demographics that are represented across our employees, our workforce. Most recently, just last week, and we have another coming up this week, we are having conversations around the topic equality, race, and ethnicity. And we've had many of those discussions. Again, over the past few weeks, many companies probably have had similar discussions in response to the killing of George Floyd. So these are some of the topics we've explored, and as we continue on this journey, we'll look for other exciting topics to explore and share within our workforce. Slide 10. So here is an example of content that we may share, and let me share a little bit more with you on how we structure these discussions. These discussions are 90 minutes. We try to have no more than 20 minutes of content, and when I say content, that is the facilitator opening up the conversation, sharing the rules of engagement, providing a little bit of content or perspective as it relates to the topic. We also record part of the sessions. We record the first part of the session, which is the content sharing. We do not record the open dialogue portion of our sessions. Again, that ties into our desire to provide a safe space and wanting employees to feel that they can share their viewpoints and opinions without it being tied to them in any way, or without there being a recording of it that could be referenced in the future. We have also created standard work for our transformative conversations, or we call them bridging connections. We have created standard work that will allow any leader within our company to be able to host these conversations within their immediate work groups, so they can easily pick up this standard work and understand what their role is as a facilitator, the logistics of these sessions, and the standard content that they can use such as the rules of engagement. So here on the screen, you have a sample of the content that we may provide. And this topic is related to gender parity in the workplace. And the content is usually around data or statistics that is publicly available, or we may provide definitions. So it's basic content, again, to provide perspective or level set on the content. Next slide. So once we have shared content, we have shared the rules of engagement in these sessions, we try to provide 3 to 4 what we call conversation starters, which are usually questions to help people start to think about what this means for them personally, or what experiences they may have had that is related to the topic, or something that they may want to share. And in this example around gender parity, here are the questions or the conversation starters that we've used. Do you see gender parity as a plus? What strategies have served you well in recognizing or addressing gender bias? What are some obstacles to achieving gender parity? So as we share those questions with participants, they're able to kind of frame up their experience, their viewpoints, and help them kind of get to thinking about what they may want to share, how they may want to view this particular topic. Next slide. So if your organization has not explored these types of conversations in the workplace, or there's hesitancy to explore these conversations, here are some tips on how you can get started. Start small and grow from there. And that's the example of our journey, where we started with in-room participation. We expected a smaller attendance, got something larger, which was great. But we started with something we thought we would do one time, and it has grown into a series over the past 3 years. Invite all in early. Originally, we only invited people in one location. Now we invite all employees, and we try to get those invitations out 3 to 4 weeks in advance. And that is just from feedback we've received, where people really want to attend, but we all know calendars can get packed pretty quickly. So to give people time to adjust or rearrange and really make the effort to attend, we invite all and we invite early. Ensure multiple ways to engage. Again, that is in-room participation or in-person participation or virtual participation. Identify a topic and have experts on hand as needed. I shared that with you in the list of topics we've explored. One other thought I would like to share is not all of the topics have to do with what's going on in the world or what's going on in your country. It could also be topics related to what is going on internal to your company. Just this year, we have gone through a separation and a complete transformation with our company, where we split our company into 2 different companies, and one part merged with another company, and the other became a standalone company, which is now Trane Technologies. And with that, one of our topics was growing through change, where we really focused on change management and helping employees manage through that change. Establish ground rules. I shared with you that for Trane Technologies, we use our diversity and inclusion mission and vision. We also use our company values to establish our ground rules, and I shared with you our rules of engagement. Use I language. That is really trying to talk about yourself, not using they or them, not even us, because these are very personal topics in how we view them and how we experience them. So using I language really helps the conversation be more about sharing of experience and viewpoints that are personal to an individual versus sharing viewpoints or opinions that could be perceived as stereotypical or lumping a group of people together. Ensure confidentiality of participants. And that ties into how we record the sessions, which I just shared with you. Give space to silence. Some of the topics could be more challenging than others in getting participants to engage. So don't be afraid to sit in silence for a few minutes to help give people time to collect their thoughts, figure out what and or how they will share. So give space to silence and don't be afraid of that awkward silent moment to give people a little time to process before they start to share and engage. And consider an executive voice. And what we mean by this is there are some conversations or topics that you may want a senior leader or executive in the room. One, it tends to draw more people, more of your employees to the conversation. And two, it shows your workforce that your senior leaders are on board, that they are part of your diversity and inclusion journey. You also should be a little careful in how you engage executives and senior leaders. You do not want your employees to feel that they cannot share. So you have to think through those things before you engage your executives and thinking through how you engage them as well. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation, and Jan, I'll turn it over to you to open it up for Q&A.
Thank you, Timitra. We really enjoyed your presentation. Before I go out and check the questions submitted and present them, do we have any live questions? Again, it is *6 to unmute your line and go ahead with your question, or you can click anywhere on this last slide and type your question as a comment. So again, any live questions? Okay, Timitra, we've received several questions throughout your presentation. Keep in mind you may have touched on these topics, but I'm going to ask all of them anyway, just in case there's something you'd like to add to or elaborate on. Okay, the first question that came in was, did you ever consider approaching this in any other way, anything other than creating the safe space and so on?
We did. In September 2016, when we brainstormed this, we considered not doing anything. We considered just putting something on our internal website to make a statement and point people to our employee assistance program. We considered trying to work with our senior leaders and just have them incorporate something into their town hall. But the more we considered the concerns that had been expressed by our employees, the more we felt we needed dedicated space for this conversation. And with that, it has proven to be the right choice. We continue to assess this method and to tweak it and determine if we need to change anything to make it more effective. So we did consider other things, but this is ultimately where we landed, and we feel that this works for our employees at the moment, at least.
Good, okay. The second question that came in is, do you ever have Discord erupt during these conversations? If so, how do you deal with it?
We have never had Discord erupt. And I'll give you an example of this first conversation was probably the most emotional one we've ever had. We had individuals who felt that the police officers were justified. We had individuals who felt otherwise. We had individuals with police officers in their family, immediate family. We had individuals who had witnessed what they felt to be some extreme use of force by police officers on their property. We had individuals who never experienced this, never saw this, never heard these viewpoints. And we were very cautious because we thought that it could become disruptive or contentious during the conversation, where there could be some very high emotions. So we had legal there and, HR professionals there who could diffuse the situations, but we didn't have to use that. And I think it's because we had the rules of engagement. We emphasized our values as a company. And, no, we haven't had discord at all. We've had some conversations where people felt that, the company should take a different stance or should have reacted differently or taken different actions. But we've had legal there or, again, HR professionals or senior leaders to provide more explanation or details on the rationale for the actions that were taken. But no, we haven't had discord. And again, I believe it's because we have really stressed our values, our expectations, and how we expect people to engage in these conversations.
Okay, thank you. The third question is, are all participants in corporate headquarters, or are you able to involve folks in your other facilities? How do you do that?
We have involved people in other facilities, other countries. We've had global participation in many of our sessions, and we use three methods of doing that. One I mentioned, before we are all working from home due to coronavirus, we had a live setting in our Davidson campus, which usually drew anywhere between 75 to 100 people in the room. We also used WebEx, which allowed people to join the conversation as well as engage in the conversation through chat feature. And we also used Skype to allow people to share their questions or comments or experiences via Skype without having to share them live. Just, again, providing the safe space, trying to provide options for various levels of comfort and how people want to engage in the conversation.
Okay, thank you. The fourth question, do these conversations routinely involve company leaders?
They do not. Often the conversations are facilitated by myself or by my leader, who is the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion and Talent Management, or they've been facilitated by one of my direct reports, who manages our employee resource groups. Our senior leaders, our C-suite leaders are they're always participants, except for our CEO, who facilitated his own discussion last week. But outside of that, they are all participants, and this is owned by our Diversity and Inclusion Office, and we are the facilitators, unless we solicit the help of our subject matter experts, who are typically external to our company, or, as I mentioned, our government affairs office if we're having conversation around politics.
Okay, good. The next question is, has participation dropped off as time has gone on?
No, it has increased, which is interesting because what we've done is had to adjust times. We've had to play with the times of these sessions. I mentioned that we invite our global employee workforce. So the time of the sessions, we have to adjust in order for them to participate and try to have a time that is conducive for most people in our workforce. The topics are relevant, so I think most people are anxious to hear or talk about them, which increases or at least maintains our level of participation. And we also, as I mentioned, we have the recordings after, but we don't include that in the actual participation. But we've seen an increase in people accessing the recordings as well.
That's nice. Okay, the last question that came in, someone says, I joined late and may have missed this, but you said you've made tweaks to get where you are now. Have those adjustments been based on satisfaction survey results, verbal feedback, participation numbers, benchmarking? What?
It has been based on participation numbers, and I just mentioned that, where we've had to make adjustments to the time for the conversations. The other is based on feedback. So what's interesting is we don't put out any type of survey after these discussions. However, we receive tons of comments via email or our internal instant message of people, saying, thank you, I've learned something, or, oh, maybe this would be a great next topic, or could we dive into this a little bit more next? So we get a lot of feedback that sometimes helps us determine the next topic or a future topic, and it helps us sometimes tweak how much content or the type of content we may share. For example, if someone has shared that, hey, that was a lot of content, I wish we would have had more time for dialogue, we've used that feedback to dial back the amount of content we provide to allow more time for discussion. When we first started, it was an hour-long discussion, and we have increased that to 90 minutes because of that feedback. We want more time to share and learn. So we've made those adjustments based on feedback that we get just either verbally immediately following these discussions or via email or instant message. We do not have shy employees, so they are always willing to share their thoughts and opinions and feedback in whatever method they feel works for them.
Okay, I think we've covered everyone's questions. Do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom you'd like to share before we end the summit today?
I would just first like to thank you all for joining. I hope that you've walked away with some information that will either help your current discussions, transformative conversations you're having in your company, or that will get you started on your transformative conversations. I will say don't shy away from any topic. It's mostly just making sure that the topic is relevant, that you're setting the stage for the engagement and the way you want people to engage in the conversation. And if you feel you need any safeguards, such as legal being involved in the conversation or any other subject matter experts, make sure you have that, but don't be afraid of it. There are so many things that in the past we said we couldn't talk about at work, or we shouldn't talk about at work, and employees are hungry to share their viewpoints and opinions and learn from their colleagues. And I feel that there is a way that this can be done in the workplace that is effective and that is productive for everyone who's involved. So thank you for joining today. Feel free to reach out to me if you have further questions or would like to discuss further. Thank you, Jan.
Oh, thank you. And thank you on behalf of all the executives on the line. You shared powerful ideas and key thoughts with us today. Your involvement and dedication to our profession sets a high benchmark for others to follow. And for all of the participants on today's call, thank you for your continued membership and insightful questions for today's speaker. The meeting's now officially concluded. Timitra, thank you so much again, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.